Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Amar with ZenMaid. You want to introduce today's topic?
Yeah, today we're going to talk about double-sided markets, how easy or harder it is, how to jumpstart it, how to disrupt an existing one. The topic actually came up because I was looking at like remoteoc.com after a tweet that I've seen. The guy who is doing it was mentioning that now he has better traffic or more ads or whatever than we work remotely. And so I check it out, and mine was like, whoa, that's just like a horrible website. Looked like Yahoo at the time where Google came and disrupted them. And I was like saying to Amar, well, all we need is like a really good Google coming in, simplifying stuff, like really nice UI and taking it over. Of course, this was like an oversimplification, got Amar triggered. And so I think that's where we started the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I would say because it's so far from an oversimplification, it's like a cliche that just doesn't work, right? Like think about every site that's like tried to knock off Reddit or Craigslist for the exact same reason. So that was just more like the point that I was like making, is just that when it comes to a two-sided marketplace, the UI UX is only like it only plays a certain like it plays like a significantly less importance once like some of them get traction than it does in almost like any other business model, right? Is in SaaS, the UI UX is so important, right? And like the better UI UX literally means like a better product. But when it comes to something like Upwork, for Upwork, I don't care if Upwork has the best UI UX. I care that they have the best possible candidates to hire. That's what makes their platform valuable, not the UI UX, right? I mean, to an extent, it has to be usable, but that was kind of the point that I was making, because like knowing Peter and how he approaches things, I get the feeling that all the stuff that he has on those pages are probably for SEO reasons. So even though they may not look as good as you might want, it gets him way more traffic, which is how he's winning. Like, I don't think that he's probably under any false illusions about like those like potential, like improvements, but he's optimizing for traffic. And I think that's important, when we look at these things from the outside, it's just important to realize kind of what they're focused on. And sometimes that's not clear, right? He might be focused on something completely different that we're not aware of.
Okay, so that's a good point. The question here we got is the real question we can ask ourselves and maybe discuss about it is, can a double-sided market compete based on UX? So that's question one. If we come back to the job board specifically, one thing that is to consider is that one side is really temporary. Actually, both sides are really temporary. Once you find a job, then that's it for maybe 3-4 years, maybe 1 year only, whatever. Maybe let's say it's yearly cyclical, right? So it's 1 year. But also on the other side, on the employee, like some employees don't necessarily always advertise either. So both sides are really temporary, which means over 1 year, you could definitely flip the entire market, right? Unless there is some competitive advantage, whether it's like SEO, or actually, no, if I flip the SEO, then chances are that I become the first one, right?
What do you mean an entire market? I'm not following that. Like
there is no
if you were to do
retention.
this for a year, I don't agree with that at
Unless
all.
you actually build the list.
Most companies are hiring constantly, right? Like most companies, it's not one and done for hiring, right? If I find a good job board, I keep listing jobs there if the job board like caters to whatever I'm hiring for. So like that I don't necessarily agree with. On the candidate side more so, but there is still some repeating. But from a company side, it's definitely not one and done. Right? Like we're on the smaller side of companies, we have to remember, right? Like most companies that are, most companies I think are most like established companies are hiring considerably more often than we are.
Yeah,
I mean, that's probably a minor point. Sorry, I didn't.
No,
I
that's
didn't
a good
interrupt you. If
point.
you want to keep going, yeah.
No, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. At the same time, I sort of like review my options every time I need to advertise. Like, where should it be now? Is it still we work remotely? Is it something else? And so
That's I think an over optimization though on your part. I don't. I think about it every like couple of like months or once a year we revisit that stuff. We don't do it every time we post a job. We just post it to different places and then like we see if there's other places that maybe we haven't considered. But I think that might be the
Also on a yearly
optimizer mindset
basis.
kind of coming out.
I do it on a
Well,
yearly basis. I do it on a yearly basis,
okay.
but that's what I mean is that, every year you kind of like review sort of your options, but yeah, that's interesting. So it's not like, well, actually it is. Actually, you think about it, like, do we have like double-sided market that are like continuous? I think the one you mentioned about, a company that keeps on hiring nonstop all the time, like to keep their pipe full, makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
They will always like be advertising and having repeating businesses. But is there like a double-sided market where, it's never temporary?
Yeah, I mean Uber.
What it is, every ride, right?
I see. I see what you mean by temporary. Sorry, I thought you meant that people would only come back like once and wouldn't come back again. Oh, so you mean the service is like ongoing?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I didn't think of
Um,
that.
well, I mean recruitment, like there's a lot of like recruitment things that are like, well, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, it could
I
be
guess it
like
depends a
maid
lot on the type of
services,
client.
potentially. Like maid services, like
Yeah,
you're looking for a
potentially.
maid, someone looking for someone to clean
Yeah.
their house on a regular basis, or like continuously in the
Hmm.
contract every week or whatever. Okay, that could be something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, could
Anyway,
be.
so how would
I,
you go about,
yeah.
let's say you want to disrupt, this job board stuff, right? And your unique competitive advantage right now is, let's say, UX. Would you actually go at it or would you not? What would be your
I
approach?
don't think that that's important. I don't think that's really a fair question because it doesn't fit in
Of course, it's
this.
not fair.
Like, well, but it's fair to the point that there's no point in answering it, right? Of like, when you're talking about a two-sided marketplace, the only thing that matters is the chicken and the egg problem. So unless the UI UX is going to somehow give you a unique advantage in like getting to both sides of the market, just having a smoother experience isn't going to matter if you can't solve the chicken and egg problem, right? And it's why, companies get so dominant when they solve, the two-sided marketplace place. Like, well, one thing that I thought was an interesting question. I don't know if you've like thought of this. Have you thought about any marketplace kind of plays for QuickMail? Do you have any ideas for like a two-sided marketplace around there? Because I have at least one that we've come up with for maid services that I've like thought about pretty extensively as a potential marketing tool or potentially something for the future, as like another business like arm or whatever.
Yeah. Do you want to share your one? Then maybe giving me some
Yeah,
ideas.
so ours is just essentially a job board that all of our maid service owners need to be hiring and bringing on cleaners on a very, very regular basis. So we obviously have a full database of maid services. We also have, databases and databases of cleaners that have worked for all of like of our like clients. Now, granted, we'd have to figure out what would be like an appropriate way to get in contact with them if we were going to do that. But the point is that because we already have, I mean, in that case, we actually have both sides of the market. We have a bunch of cleaners to start it, and we have a bunch of maid services to start it. And so we were thinking that that could jumpstart it. We'd also thought about doing like more so like the Yelp for cleanings specifically. So more like we would create the directory of cleaning companies and then connect potential cleaning clients with those companies. But that's actually more of like of an uphill sort of like battle. In that case, like we've got to go out and get all of the cleaning clients like nationwide versus if we do the job boards, we have both sides of the market right from the get-go. So those were kind of the two ideas that we had.
Yeah, I really love the idea. Actually, I may actually even execute on one of them. But beside that, what's a good takeaway lesson here right now is like, obviously you're mentioning, the chicken and egg stuff, but one of your solution that you're mentioning is basically like doing super niche. So for you, it will be, job board, but just for, this kind of niche. And then you can always
Mhm.
extend later on. And I think it's a great one. It's like, it's a good way of, going at the incumbents. Like the incumbents got like suddenly like so much noise about everything. Like everyone wants to, advertise on this. Then you just do it like just specifically for this vertical here, right there and then. I think it's a good one. Especially if you find that this vertical needs better, filtering stuff, like, or things that get them like the right maybe jobs. So for example, it will be, let's say it's a job, in technology, then listing what technology would actually be an important thing. But when it's like for everything, you don't necessarily list, certain specific filter that will be just for this industry. I think would make sense, definitely. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that. So start niche.
Yeah. So we've
would
thought
be the
about
first
that.
advice.
Yeah. And there's out of the box like software that we can buy now that does like the job boards like for us. So yeah, that's another one that I've definitely like thought about. Again, it's like it's the chicken and egg problem. So it's one that like it could take a lot of resources to get off the ground, but I also feel like it's one that if we do it at some point for ZenMaid, it'll likely take on a life of its own at some point, the way that like the Made Summit did and the way that our Facebook group did, in that like it could get us quite outsized marketing returns if it were to go well. It also might take us a bunch of time and flop, but it's one of those ideas that I have where it's like, oh, like this is something that could actually get 10 times as many people seeing ZenMaid if this thing really took off, or it might just really have like no impact. So it's an interesting one for us to try in the future, but it's kind of a high risk.
At some point, like Airbnb has been praised from their sort of like cunning tactics of actually, grabbing or scraping all the work, all the things on Craigslist. And that's a great idea. It's a great illustration actually of the concept of niching down, which is Craigslist was for everything. Airbnb just scrape only the listing apartments, for that, and then exported them. But it's funny because, I'm sure the people on Craigslist were not very happy about this.
Have you ever seen the graphic where it's like from Craigslist? You can essentially look, so Craigslist is just a giant classified advertisements like website for the United States.
Yeah.
And they pointed out to almost every single individual category on Craigslist now has a billion or multi-billion dollar startup that's in that space, right?
So
Whether
cool.
it's to sell cars, whether it's to trade homes like Airbnb and all of that stuff. And so you can also see that with Reddit as well, is that almost every subreddit has like dedicated forums for like watches and cars and like all this stuff, that there are companies that just make hundreds of millions of dollars in like these little like niches. So I thought that was like really interesting as like a way to sort of view opportunities. Actually, I really enjoyed that.
I like that. It's a great idea. Idea. And so, yeah, opportunities, because, you have like that general stuff, the Craigslist stuff, and then we niche down to one thing. Do you think, I personally think it'd be easier that it's just not just niching down, but also coming up with one new key ideas, like one, unique feature or unique stuff. Do you think that's also like a requirement or not?
For,
let's say, for example, you have like, let's say, for example, the job board, like, not all jobs, only, you narrow it down to one specific niche. And inside it's like, do you offer exactly the same thing? Like, obviously not, right? You have to have something different as well, or you don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
You just need the market from your point of view, right?
Well, I mean, I think everything comes down to the offer, but I don't think that you need to do anything unique. I just think you maybe need to do a couple of things better than the competitor, and then finding kind of your little sort of like tribe within like that niche. But I don't think you've got to do anything like truly unique, right? Like I think that Monster or Indeed are going to do all of the things that we're going to try to do on a job board, but in some ways it's like removing some of the things can actually be like the value add, right? Is, hey, like I've simplified this to only the stuff that you need to like ask for to like hire cleaners effectively. So you don't need to waste your time on like Indeed and all of like that's answering all of their trash questions that have nothing to do with with our industry. right? It could be something along like those lines, but like I
Or
wouldn't
they're
consider it
vetted.
unique. I would consider it repackaging.
Yeah,
Yeah, or vetting. Yeah.
yeah,
That's a good way to
that's
value add as well. Love it.
yeah. Value add as a sort of like compass, you know, for how to go
Hmm.
about it. So that's cool. What about the realistic time frame? Like, do you think, if I wanted to go at that, like, do you think a valid time frame would be, a few months, a quarter, a
I don't
year?
think that this is another one of like, this is a complete waste of time because it's a mistake to even assume that it would work with a two-sided marketplace. It's one of the hardest businesses to make work because it can be a very winner take all thing, right? So like
That
how
is
long it's
true.
going to take is like, yeah, how long it's going to take is just like there's no point in even bothering like to answer that. It just depends on way too many like factors and like there's so many things like yeah, like I said, because it's a chicken and egg problem, it's a really really difficult one.
That's
um
fine. So
like
let's take some concrete
it's like
example.
what
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what Rob Walling says from Startups for the Rest of Us is don't do a two-sided marketplace unless you have funding, with the exception of if you already have one side of the market, right? So if
I
you don't
like
have
that.
either side of the market, then trying to like do that, I would say that it's never going to happen, right? Like you're never
Well,
going to catch like the incumbents if you don't have like, some way in outside of the job board to get people into like your funnel, right?
so I do know someone who actually started the
Yeah,
double-sided market from scratch, absolutely from
nice.
scratch. He did it super well. Uh, well, okay, with a few caveats, but he did won the market in Switzerland compared to there was like a massive giant website offering that in Germany, and so he started doing the same thing but it's for local tradesmen and stuff.
Hmm.
So the geographical position do make sense, right? And so he did it for traffic in Switzerland, and just like going after each categories and so on. So he did that. It took him some time, but it was like super simple to kick started because all he had to do was focus purely on SEO, and then got the
Yep.
offer, and then just contact people and say, hey man, like a local tradesman, he say like, hey, we got like 20
Yep.
potential gigs for you if you go to that stuff. And then of course people want gigs, and so they go to that stuff, they put the offer, and so that's how he actually kick started, because one side is actually driving the value of the double-sided market in that sense, right? So
Yeah.
he has the job. It's like it's super easy, like everyone likes most of the time when if I remember myself, like back in the time where I went to startup weekends and stuff like that, a lot of people, when they come up with a double-sided market, they always try to get the wrong side first, which is, for example, like a typical double-sided market is like food. Someone would check for food, and the other one, like the restaurants actually offering the offer, and they always try to get the wrong side, the wrong side. They always try to get the side of the restaurants first, but in fact, if you go
Mm.
to the restaurants with like, hey, we got like 20 people in to eat, are you interested? Then that works much better than the other side. Is like, hey, can you actually list on our stuff? There's nothing yet, and then maybe I'll find the people. So you see what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
focusing on the right side is very
And
important to kickstart
one
it.
thing, one thing to also keep in mind is that you also know that all restaurants want more clients, which makes it also like a different
Exactly.
problem. That with a job board, you can't do that, right? A job board, you can't go out and advertise to like, to like potential hires without knowing anything about like who has jobs available and all that stuff. That's a very quick way to lose trust in anyone that comes and like and finds you. So in that sense, like that's something that you can't fake it until you make it, right? Whereas with tradesmen, it's probably a lot easier like to do. I mean, I don't know. I guess it could still work, and like in some ways, it would just be a little bit more difficult to execute, right? I just think it's like an important detail, just like to note there, because it does just kind of change like the decision making like framework, I guess.
Makes sense. So what would you recommend someone who wants to compete with Remote Oak and we work remotely?
I mean, don't, or like make sure that you've actually got something like
Ooh.
unique. Like, well, no, like I will no. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I don't think that like what you were pointing out at the beginning is like a strong enough reason for someone to like feel like they should go after like remote, like okay or
Sure.
whatever, right? Like, I think that if you feel like you have an actual not even just like an advantage, like you should realize that like whatever it is that you're going to do is going to end up sort of finding its own place like next to remote okay, even if there's significant overlap and if you guys like compete for business or whatever. So to me it's like, ignore them and think more about like what you're going to do that's going to help people in a way that remote okay like currently isn't, right?
Love
Because
it.
like that's like one thing there, like Jeremy is like talking to people and finding out what their problems are is obviously going to tell you like, okay, what gap can I fill in the market? The fact that like we don't like what their website looks like doesn't tell us anything about a gap in the market, right?
It's true.
So yeah, I think that would be like it. So like for us for ZenMaid, which is interesting because I feel like it's kind of combining the ideas. It's kind of what you were just talking about here towards like the end. Is for me, if we were to start like the job board, we would probably want to like really do it by like pulling the cleaners in of like, hey, like the cleaners are interested in jobs, you know. Are you guys like
Exactly the
hiring and
same way.
reaching out to the
Yeah.
people? Yeah, because for us, we know for a fact that cleaners or that maid service owners are always hiring, right? Like they're always losing people, they're always hiring. So we don't
Well,
have
you
to know
could
who's
say,
hiring
hey,
and who's
we have
not.
20 leads available in Atlanta. Do you actually want to go ahead
Well,
and then
we go we'd have to find a way to get people like listed first, right? The whole thing is that's where the chicken and egg problem like happens, right? Is how do we get those 20 leads without having something like listed there, right? That's kind of the problem here. Like those 20 leads don't just come from nowhere. So it's like how do we get those 20 leads without having like
hmm,
jobs to advertise?
you don't need the job to advertise, but that's a different stuff. Like I was mentioning you, the guy in Switzerland that did it. He actually made a workplace where the user advertised the job they need. So that will be like, hey, I need my house to be cleaned, and then they receive the quotes by different providers. So then you could effectively say, okay, there's 3 people that advertise in Atlanta, and then you contact all the cleaning company in Atlanta, saying them like, hey, we got this thing, we got 3 potential people that are willing to, do you want to then go and then do your offer or your quotes to those, right? And so for that they need to create a
Hmm.
thing, and then from
Yeah,
that
so
then they
so
become
we
on your system, and so that way. But you will need to capture the
okay.
SEO for cleaning my house in Atlanta or whatever. So it's a
Well, we're
very
not
hard
we're not
work.
gonna we're not gonna target cleanings, but jobs. Yeah, we'll target cleaning jobs, which might actually work. Okay, interesting, interesting idea.
we
Yeah,
could we
just
could
because we
I'm
would we would
happy to
connect the
go and hire the
cleaners.
details with you. Mhm.
Yeah, we would connect the cleaners and the maid services. That's an interesting idea. If people could come to the website and go, "Hey, are you interested in like in getting a job cleaning that pays anywhere from, we could just make up like the numbers that we're confident people will pay, and then you send those leads over to the ZenMaid users that are in that area
Exactly,
and
exactly,
see."
automatically.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
people just
Let
reach
me
like, hey,
let
I'd like
me
my house to be clean. Do you have any, send me
uh
some quotes. And then you
Jeremy.
automatically contact all your users that are in that area and say, hey, you have a potential leads. Are you interested? So not only is that made help them to actually manage their business, it also bring them business, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I'm thinking about there's a couple of job board creators, yeah, that we
Man,
could
if you got
use to just do this.
yeah, if you got that working, no one can, and people will even get a license of ZenMaid just for the leads, not even for the
Yeah,
software.
that'll be the real moat there. And yeah, no, I've got some big ideas around that because if you did that, then there's another software in our industry that we could buy that would immediately like, add on to that. Huh, interesting. Okay, well, this podcast episode might lead to me, making quite a bit of money. Because yeah, like from there, it's like you could either charge
Like
for the
five
leads as
percent
they come in, or once people, I don't know, what do you mean 5%?
of extra revenue generated. I was just joking.
Oh,
I see you're super serious.
but
Carry on.
you could you could you could charge either for the cleaning like job lead. So like, hey, like, for $10 we'll send you this applicant's information, or you could charge people to like feature their job posts on the job board, right? But if
I
yeah,
wouldn't
we
do
could
that.
probably get that
It
to
will
the
have to be
point.
free if I want to clean my house. I got this like for free, and I get the best quotes from the cleaners around, and then can pick up from them.
No. But again, I'm not working with the cleaning clients. We're not talking about the cleaning clients to get the house cleaned. It's for the cleaners themselves to get jobs with the maid services. So does that change it? Like we're not going to target like you, the cleaning owner. We're trying to get or sorry, the house owner to get like their house cleaned. We're going to target the cleaners that work for the maid services. Those are the two sides of our marketplace.
Oh,
Helping cleaners get jobs with maid
I thought it was the
services.
same people, like the same company,
No,
the owner and the cleaners. Okay,
uh, those would be the two sides, connecting the owners with the cleaners,
okay, got it. I thought it was like the same.
right?
Okay,
Yeah. So does that
interesting.
change anything in terms of like the feedback?
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends. Like, do the cleaner
Yeah.
actually do search for the the maid owners? Like, do they actually search like, hey, I'd like a job, whatever, and then they sort of like vet? I don't know.
We'd have
It's
to
like,
look at the traffic on that. Yeah, we'd probably want to look at like cleaning jobs near me or like yeah, we'd probably have to do some research on like on different
got it.
SEO things like that because that's probably where we would win. Um
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
so yeah, like I said, we could just send leads and just charge for like four leads, or you could just set up that system so it just sends the leads out for free, and then everyone is just getting constant ZenMaid like advertising. You're just like, hey, you got another lead delivered to you by ZenMaid. Click here to check out our software, and you just do that until everyone's like on board with us. Huh. Okay,
Well,
this
lots
podcast
of
might make me some money.
interesting. Here's one thing I'd like to finish on. I
Yeah.
actually did start a double-sided market before QuickMail. So bear in mind, I
hmm
had like no, marketing
Yeah.
experience, no, understanding beside building a product. And the funny thing is that I think this product will be worth nothing these days because basically the biggest difference that I did compared to the other jobs is that it listed jobs near you. So you could effectively see on a map where those jobs are, and because it was like a personal problem at some point, I was looking for a new job, and I had my place where I was in Switzerland. I didn't want to move and relocate. Right nowadays it's better
hmm
because it's like, oh, I can work remotely, and then that's it, end of the story. But at that time it was pretty important for me to find another job around, and the view that I had with the existing job board didn't actually help me to have this sort of like view about like, oh, I want like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes max, driving from where I was and just keeping on receiving like, the offering that matches my criteria and stuff like that. It didn't work out. Well, surprise surprise, otherwise I wouldn't be on QuickMail. But I wonder, like, could I have made it work these days where I have like way more, understanding or way more like founder savvy, type of skills than I had at the time? Um, I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting question. I will
I
never know.
mean, I would say you'd have to find something more of a differentiator than like a map view. I don't think that that would be a big enough differentiator because that's still the classic chicken and egg problem that doesn't make like I don't care about that job board unless you get so many folks on there that it's a reliable place for me to go and find a job. Like it's not like like the difference with like the remote okay like job board is that if someone is looking for a remote job, they're willing to go in to check that job board even if there's only 5 or 10 like jobs on there, just so that they can find a remote job, and if they can't then they go look on other places, right? Where I'm not going to go do that just because you have one feature showing the geographic like location, right? So I think that is like a great feature, but it's still a nice to have in there. So like I think you could make that marketplace work, but you'd need another differentiating kind of thing or another way to sort of like to stand out within the marketplace. You
Well,
know
I
what I
had all
mean?
the offers because I was actually passing, the existing, the best job boards at the time where I was. So I was actually getting all
Yeah.
the offer. I was just presenting a different view. But
So
then the money
yeah.
was difficult to figure out, like, who is paying for that? Like, where does the money come from? Who is paying was actually the biggest thing that I never, cracked down.
Yeah. I mean, with that, you could have just looked at like other job boards and eventually kind of tweaked your way. But the other thing there is that the other big thing there is you'd be building a job board around a feature, and not like a true differentiator, that anyone
That's a
could
good
come
point.
along that has way more jobs on the thing and go, oh yeah, we already have all of these companies' address. Oh look, we just put together a map view, and then your
Yeah,
differentiator
it's a
is just
toggle button
completely
and then
like
you're gone.
gone.
Yeah,
Right. Exactly. Right. And so that's
okay.
just something that, it doesn't mean that it won't work. And there's lots of cases where like, where that's been exactly true. And yet that toggle button that could have killed the competitor, that company is now worth billions, right? So you never know, but it would just be an important consideration to make.
Cool. All right, so you heard it from Amar. He's not going to go in double-sided market for job offering. I may still, because I still think there is some interesting stuff here, and people didn't crack it yet, I believe.
I might for ZenMaid. For ZenMaid, I see
for
a
ZenMaid,
clear like path. Yeah, for ZenMaid, I think that makes sense. For Remote OK, I feel like there's still arguments to be made about how it could be better. So
it's a good point. How would you apply this to QuickMail, for example? Like, I got some ideas, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, to QuickMail, I mean, I would be thinking about some sort of matchmaker sort of like service for agencies to connect agencies with folks that need help with cold email. You could do things like cold email, sort of like coaching or services or whatever. You could do like a job board for people that wanted to get into like cold email or work for lead generation agencies, right? Yeah, I mean, if you were to like write more content that's like less technical and more on like all the benefits of cold email, you could add in call to actions on all your blog articles of like, use QuickMail to get this done for your business, or like want help with implementation, click here to see like our marketplace of experts, right? You can look at what like ActiveCampaign does, and I think ConvertKit has got some like similar things. Those are all very like supplementary, right? Like those are things that are not likely to survive on their own without like, the QuickMail, brand like behind them and everything, but they could still be like nice offshoots to your business, and they could take on a life of their own and really add a lot of value.
Yeah, I got some ideas. I think I'm gonna investigate some of them. So
nice.
All right, let's review this podcast in 3 years when we both got our double market side and dominating our space.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Amar on Twitter, Jay Chatelain on Twitter. Go for it. Interact with us. We're lonely guys. We have no friends. Please send us a tweet. Like, it's like a beggar, on the street. Send us a tweet, please. All right, see you next time.
Nice. All right, cool. See ya.